And for anyone doesn't, this influences Christianity big time with the devil. And there's a passage in Matthew where Jesus is in the wilderness and he's being tempted by the devil. And I'm not even kidding. If you look at the Zend Avesta, the passage lines up almost verbatim, where it's the same thing. You have Zoroaster in the wilderness chanting, doing his thing, and then all of a sudden Amino comes out and was like, "Hey, if you worship me, I'll give you the boon to rule all the."
Amino.
Yeah. He goes, "I'll give you the boon to rule all the nations." And then, of course, Zoroaster just keeps chanting to Ahura Mazda, and Angramanu is rushed away, pushed off. This story really influences how Jesus is portrayed in Matthew. And by the way, it just happens to be the same book that starts off with Magi chasing a star to find, like, there can't be a coincidence. This is a highly, people think Matthew is a Jewish book. I don't see it. I think it's just Eastern book. I guess that would make more sense, right?
There's a lot that could be said about all of that. Yeah, I'll try to come back to it.
Sure.
In particular to the devil, okay? Because the devil's in the details.
Yeah.
Anyway, so Angraminu, right? What is this Angraminu? Gere, constrained, constricted. This is the force or counterforce that is constraining progress, is suffocating life, is constricting our flourishing, right? So it's a force of how can I put it? Stagnation and stasis and retardation, actually. Okay, and so one important thing about this Angraminu notion that becomes Ahriman in Middle Persian is that it means Ahura Mazda is not omnipotent. Okay, he's neither omnipotent nor omniscient. And this is really important because many theologians have recognized, and on account of this fact, Zoroastrianism doesn't face the problem of evil. In any religion where you have an omniscient and omnipotent God, there's the problem of God being responsible for all the evil in the world. And if, in my view, more importantly, the fact that you don't have any free will. You cannot have free will and have an omnipotent and omniscient God. It just doesn't work, okay? It's completely illogical. And any jackass like St. Augustine who wants to say that it's a miracle, I'm not going to give him the time of day, all right? So you got to choose between your omniscient God, omnipotent God, on the one hand, and free will on the other. Zarathustra doesn't face that problem. Ahura Mazda is limited. The power and even the knowledge of Ahura Mazda is limited by this counterforce. And this means we have free will. We have the free will radically to choose between these two forces and which one we want to align ourselves with. And that's a message you find at the core of the Gathas. Zarathustra repeatedly says, and emphatically so, you, with your own intellect, observe, discern, and choose which of the forces you want to align yourself with, either Sepantaminu or Angraminu. And to go back to the beginning of our discussion, the Devas are aligned with Angraminu. Okay? Right. So, and he specifically says this in the Gathas. There is this very strange passage in the Gathas, which, if you ask me, aligns with the myth of Atlantis that you find in Plato. And, with some things in the Vedic context in terms of the Mahabharata's accounts of the ancient wars between the Devas and the Asuras and so forth, there is a strange passage in the Gathas where Zarathustra says that when the Devas were deliberating, Angramenu came in and he, as a great deceiver, confused their deliberations, and they rushed in wrath and destroyed the life of mankind. Well, what is this talking about? This is talking about when Zeus calls a convocation of the Olympians and they decide to destroy the world through a great deluge, right? And in particular, they're targeting the Atlanteans who have rebelled against Olympus. So the Devas, the gods, are aligned with Angramenu or Ahriman. And we have the free choice to be able to basically resist these heavenly powers that, notice now the Gnostic structure is already becoming clear. These heavenly powers that stand between us and the true divine intelligence of the cosmos.
Archons.
Yeah. So the Devas are the Archons. Wow. Zarathustra's take on the Devas, or Devs, it's where we get the word devil from, Devs, right? the Devas, they are the archons. They're the prototype for the Gnostic archons, who stand between us and our alignment with the divine intelligence, in the cosmos.
Wow. Yeah, it's now the more you talk about it, the more it's starting to look a lot clearer of how these ideas line up.
One last very important piece of the message of the Gathas that's going to become fundamental to Gnosticism, and that's the idea that, well, two more.
Yeah.
One is that this choice, this free choice that we have, has to be exercised within a certain time frame. Zarathustra is the first person in recorded history to have a teleological conception of time. So all of these ancient cultures, the Greek culture, the Vedic culture, the Mayan culture, ancient Egyptian, etc., everywhere across the entire globe, you had cyclical conceptions of time, where there were a series of world ages that you'd go through, from the Golden Age, the Silver Age, the Bronze Age, etc., Iron Age, or the Greek, Satya Yuga, all the way to the Kali Yuga, and then the cycle would repeat itself, right? Zarathustra says, no, there is a successive series of world ages that are in a progressive trajectory toward an end of history. That's an apocalypse. And this end of history is a final judgment between the forces of wisdom and the forces of ignorance and retardation, between the forward momentum of creation and regression, retardation, and basically the power of death. And so we have to make our choice before this final event. And this final event is symbolized by the entire globe being engulfed in flame. Okay, the world being set ablaze, which is an alchemical metaphor, right? It's the alchemical fire transmuting this world into a more perfect form. And they call this the Freshgard. This is what Zarathustra calls it in the Gathas in its original form, Frasho Kereti, and it becomes Freshgard in Middle Persian. Literally, if you can hear the word fresh in that, Freshgard, Frasho Kereti, fresh. Right. So it's the refreshing of the world. It's like hitting the refresh button on a browser, right? It's the refreshing of the world. And it's accomplished through this alchemical fire. And on the other side of that, everything attains its perfect form. So this brings us then to the last idea, which is key to Gnosticism. And that's that there are these farvahas or fravashis that are the perfect forms of everything in the world. And they pre-exist the created world. Now, notice, we're like 200 years before Plato here, okay? So this idea that, as I'm going to point to if we have the time, Plato gets via Pythagoras from Zarathustra, this idea of the archetypes, pre-existing physical creation on the basis of them, is also central to the message of Zarathustra, and it becomes key to Gnosticism. This is the notion of the pleroma, or some etheric, whatever, non-physical realm where there are more perfect forms of beings in this world. So the pleroma notion in its embryonic form is there in the Gathas of Zarathustra. And there's an idea that after the Freshgard, after this fiery, apocalypse, this world, this physical world, is going to more perfectly instantiate or embody this archetypal reality. And in particular, in terms of our human existence, each person who passes that trial by fire will embody his Dana. Dana is a word that Zarathustra uses, which is a cognate of the Greek dianoia, and it becomes the basis for two words in later Persian, dana, which means knowing, and dain, which means duty. So think knowing and duty. So the word dana meant conscience in the teaching of Zarathustra, and it was symbolized by a maiden who you would meet after death. And this maiden, like a Valkyrie, right? This maiden was your perfect form. your anima, you know.
Is this where Diana comes from? The goddess?
I think so, and I'll tell you why in a moment.
Okay.
Well, I'll tell you why right now, okay? Because who is Diana? Diana is the Roman form of Artemis.
Yeah.
Artemis has no meaning in Greek. We know, you know, Herodotus and other Greek writers say that the cult of Artemis was the religion of the Amazons, and they're the ones who brought it to Greece. The Amazons built the temple of Artemis. The Amazons are Iranians, okay?
Yeah, yeah.
The Amazons are Sarmatians. They're Sarmatian women, and they had a matriarchal society. And so we have to look for the meaning of Artemis in Iranian languages, not in Greek. And Artemis has a very clear meaning in Iranian languages. It's Arta Amesha. As I mentioned earlier, Arta is a Persian form of Asha, cosmic order, or truth. Truth is another translation of Asha or Arta. And then Amesha, like in, remember the Amesha Spentas.
Right.
The Amesha Spentas, the 7 emanations of Zarathustra, of Ahura Mazda. Amesha means undying or immortal, and Spenta is the sort of like the spirits, right? The immortal spirits. So Arta Amesha, Artemis, Arta Amesha means immortal truth or immortal cosmic order. And this is who Artemis really is. She's an embodiment of immortal cosmic order in a feminine form coming from out of a matriarchal Iranian society. So do I think Diana is related to Dana? Yeah, I do think it's, you know, via Artemis.
That is so true. Yeah. I don't think you can deny it. I think you just laid it out perfectly. I don't think you can even deny it.
And by the way, the chief attribute of, I don't know, attribute is not necessarily the right word, but like she's known as a huntress who's associated with archery in particular.
The oldest myth in the world is the wild hunt.
The Iranians were known as the greatest archers of the ancient world. Herodotus says the Iranians taught their kids 3 things. 1, telling the truth. 2, horseback riding. And 3, archery.
Right.
Okay. Speak the truth and shoot well with arrows. That is Persian virtue, quote unquote. That's Friedrich Nietzsche.
And even Alexander the Great, if you read Arian, before he even went to Persia in the East, he battled with the Scythians, and he recruited thousands of their archers to even go to Persia. He probably couldn't even do that unless he did that first.
Yeah, they were the greatest ballistics people in the ancient world, the Iranians in general, Scythians and Persians both.
Yeah.
So anyway, yeah, so you got this Dana. She's like this Valkyrie who's your most perfect form. And also her name becomes the word for knowledge in Persian later, Dana. And so this is Sophia. It's your inner Sophia.
Wow.
Okay. And you're supposed to become her after the end of history. After the apocalypse, we become, which is kind of bizarre because this is like it's very strange. It's an uber matriarchal conception because it's saying that both men and women have this inner feminine perfect form, and that after the end of the world, like we're all going to embody that. You know,
the Old Testament too, in Proverbs 8, where it talks about Sophia first formed the father, totally switches everything on its head. Like Adam is created by a female now. Like which one is it? But I think that's how you get these medieval Kabbalists. That's what they're interpreting later on. But anyway, that's a whole different story. But yeah, I'm basically saying this is reflective in other parts of theology and philosophy.
Yeah, and it's the Gnostic, what becomes the Gnostic destruction of the fallen world and the emergence of the pleroma as our primary form of existence, and our embodying Sophia at the end of history. And it's all right there already in the Gathas and 580 BC.
Wow.
Okay, so that lays out for us the basic message of the Gathas. And now we can finally address this question that you raised, or maybe you want to raise anew, about the influence of Zarathustra or Zoroaster on, and by the way, let me just mention this guy's name. Like, what is this? Why some people call him Zoroaster? Why is he called Zarathustra in?
Yeah, that's a good question.
People assume the Greeks came up with this Zoroaster as a corruption of Zarathustra, because Zoroaster means Zara, or Zar in Persian, means gold, and Aster, of course, is the word for star. Setare still means star in Persian, And so Zoroaster means golden star. But this is probably a corruption because Zarathustra calls himself Zarathustra in the Gathas. And, that's the whole Iranian tradition refers to him as that. And then later, when Iranology becomes sophisticated in Europe in the 1800s, 1700s, 1800s, you have the correct name Zarathustra reemerge, and that's why Nietzsche uses the correct name of Zarathustra rather than Zoroaster. And Zarathustra means not golden star, but golden camel. Ushtara is camel. Later becomes the word shotor. Ushtara or shotor in contemporary Persian means camel. So his name meant golden camel. And back in that time when he was alive, the two most prized animals were horses and camels. And you found a lot of people with an name ending aspa, like Zarathustra's own friend Jamaspa, the king that became his patron, Visht Aspa. Aspa means horse, and Ushtara means camel. So you had people named so-and-so camel or so-and-so horse. And so his name means golden camel.
That's interesting you say that, because I'm learning Greek right now, and my Greek teacher was just telling me that if you every time you see the str in a word, this comes from a family. It's a certain family of linguistic words that have like a root somewhere. It's like real deep in mythology, I guess. But and also as far as the camels go, you could see why camels would be so valuable, because you can put tons of items on their back and travel long distances without having to carry it. Like traders needed camels.
That's right. That's right. And of course, in this case, we're talking not about, because your viewers are going to think Iran, whatever, Middle East. No, we're not talking about Arabian camels here. We're talking about the Central Asian camel.
Right.
Zarathustra was living up towards Central Asia. So we're talking about the Central Asian camel. In any case, that's irrelevant.